Your intelligence is destroying you and you don't even see it. Every book you've read, every concept you understand, every strategy you've memorized, it's all become a prison. You're sitting on a mountain of knowledge and somehow, you're still exactly where you were 2 years ago. Same struggles, same patterns, same frustration. Here's the question nobody wants to ask. What if being smart is actually what's keeping you stuck? This is part 2 of our series. And today I'm going to show you why intelligence without direction isn't just ineffective, it's failure wearing a disguise. It's the most sophisticated form of self-sabotage because it feels productive. It feels like progress, but it's not. And if you stay with me until the end, you're going to understand why some of the smartest people you know are living mediocre lives while others with half their intelligence are building empires. Because the difference isn't about what you know, it's about what you're willing to do with what you know. Let's go deep. I need you to picture something with me for a second. Imagine you're standing in the middle of a massive library. Thousands of books, millions of pages, every subject you could ever want to learn. History, science, philosophy, business, psychology, it's all there. And you have unlimited time to read whatever you want. Now here's the question. Does being in that library make you successful? Does having access to all that information automatically translate into results in your life? Of course not. That's obvious, right? But that's exactly how most intelligent people are living. We've confused access to knowledge with the application of knowledge. We think that because we understand something intellectually, we've somehow integrated it into our reality. I spent years doing this. I could have conversations about behavioral economics, about market cycles and investment strategies. I sounded competent. I felt competent. But my life wasn't changing, my bank account wasn't growing. My habits weren't improving. I was intellectually rich and practically broke. And the worst part, I couldn't see it. Because when you're smart, you develop incredible skills at rationalizing your situation. You tell yourself you're building a foundation. You tell yourself you're waiting for the right opportunity. You tell yourself you need just a little more information before you're ready to. But here's what's really happening. You're hiding. You're using learning as a shield against the discomfort of real action. Because as long as you're still studying, still preparing, still optimizing your plan, you never have to face the possibility of actual failure. Think about that. How many times have you delayed taking action because you convinced yourself you needed to learn more first? How many times have you started something, hit resistance, and then pivoted to learning a new strategy instead of pushing through the part? Intelligence gives us this ability to see all the variables, all the potential problems, all the ways something could go wrong. And instead of using that awareness to navigate challenges, we use it as evidence for why we shouldn't start. We analyze ourselves into paralysis. There's a concept in psychology called analysis paralysis, but it's deeper than just overthinking. It's about using your cognitive abilities to generate an infinite number of reasons. Why now isn't the right time? Why this approach might not be optimal? Why you should explore other options? And every one of those reasons sounds logical. That's the trap. You're not making excuses, you're making rational. Except those rational observations are keeping you frozen, while less intelligent. People are out there making messy progress. I remember watching someone I knew build a business. This person wasn't particularly brilliant, didn't read business books, didn't understand advanced marketing frameworks. But they had one thing I didn't: directional clarity. They knew what they wanted, and they moved toward it every single day without questioning whether it was the absolute best path. Meanwhile, I was still comparing business models, still researching the perfect niche, still convinced that if I just found the right strategy, everything would fall into place effortlessly. But success doesn't come from finding the perfect path. It comes from choosing a path and making it work through relentless iteration and adjustment. And intelligent people struggle with this because we want to solve problems, theoretically, before we encounter them practically. We want the blueprint. We want the guarantee. We want to know that if we do A, then B will definitely happen. But reality doesn't work that way. Reality is messy. It's unpredictable. It requires you to make decisions with incomplete information and then adapt as go. And that's terrifying for someone whose entire identity is built around being the person who has the answers. So let me ask you something uncomfortable. What are you avoiding right now by staying in learning mode? What action have you been postponing because you're still figuring things? Sit with that for a moment, because until you're honest about what your intelligence is protecting you from, you'll keep spinning in circles, getting smarter but never getting different results. Your mind is a tool, but you've forgotten who's supposed to be holding it. Right now your thoughts are running you. Every doubt, every comparison, every brilliant idea that distracts you from the thing you're supposed to be on, it's all controlling your behavior. And you've convinced yourself that this is just how smart people think. But there's a difference between strategic thinking and mental chaos. And most of us are living in chaos while calling it intelligence. Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying decision-making. And one of his most important findings was this: human beings are terrible at distinguishing between thoughts that serve us and thoughts that sabotage us. We treat all thoughts as equally valid, as if every idea that crosses our mind deserves serious consideration. But it doesn't. Most of your thoughts are just noise, mental loops that your brain runs automatically because that's what it's done. And when you're intelligent, you're exceptionally good at making that noise sound convincing. Let me give you an example. You decide you're going to start a business. You're excited. You have clarity, you know what you're going to do. But then 3 days in, your brain starts generating questions. What if someone else is already doing this? What if you're not qualified enough? What if there's a better model you haven't discovered yet? And because you're smart, you take those questions seriously. You start exploring alternatives. And before you know it, you've abandoned the thing you were building. Not because it wasn't working, but because your mind convinced you there was a smarter approach. This is the cycle. Intelligence without discipline is just sophisticated distraction. So here's what needs to happen. You need to become the director of your thoughts, instead of the audience. You need to learn to recognize when your mind is serving you, and when it's sabotaging you. And the only way to do that is through discipline. Not the kind of discipline where you force yourself to do things you hate. The kind where you make a decision about who you're becoming and then you defend that decision against every thought and impulse that contradicts it. This is identity-level work. Because as long as you identify as someone who explores options, who values flexibility, who needs to understand everything before committing, you will never build anything substantial. You'll just keep sampling different approaches, getting decent at nothing, mastering nothing. But when you decide, really decide, that you're someone who finishes who commits fully even when it's uncomfortable, who values execution over optimization, everything changes. Your brain will still generate doubts, it will still suggest alternatives. But instead of treating those thoughts as signals to pivot, you recognize them as noise and keep moving. Now this is the only time I'm going to pause and ask for something. If what I'm saying is hitting you, if you're seeing yourself in this pattern, do me a favor, hit the like button, drop a comment, and follow the channel. It takes 2 seconds and it genuinely helps more people find this content. I've put together something practical that might save you months of spinning your wheels. It's in the first pinned comment below, a guide with 21 specific mental activations designed to cut through the fog and rebuild focus in 7 days, even when your mind feels like a battlefield. It costs less than lunch. But the clarity it creates could be worth years of wasted effort. If you're serious about breaking this pattern, check it out. All right, let's keep going. Discipline is built in micro moments. Every time you have a thought that pulls you off course and you choose not to, you're building the neural pathway of self-mastery. Every time you feel resistance to doing the thing you committed to and you do it. Anyway, you're rewiring your brain to trust your decisions over your feelings. This is where most people fail. They make decisions emotionally and then expect discipline to feel easy. But discipline is specifically the ability to act in alignment with your commitments, when your emotions are pulling you in the opposite direction. And intelligent people struggle with this more than anyone because we can always construct a logical argument for why breaking our commitment makes sense. We're not being weak. We're being adaptive, we're being strategic. But you know what that really is? It's you negotiating with yourself. And every negotiation you win against your own commitment, you lose trust in your ability to follow through. So here's the practice. Make smaller commitments and keep all of them. Stop making grand declarations about what you're going to build or achieve. Just commit to one thing today, one specific action, and then do it. No negotiations, no exceptions. Do that for 30 days straight and you'll become a different person. Not because the action itself is transformative, but because you'll have proven to yourself that you're someone who keeps their word. And that shift, that internal knowing that when you say you're going to do something, it gets done. That's the foundation of everything else. Let me tell you what nobody says about wealth building. It's not complicated. It's just uncomfortable. All the strategies you've studied, all the frameworks you understand, they work. You know they work because you've seen other people use them successfully, but you're not using them. Not consistently, not with full commitment. Because implementing a strategy requires you to give up optionality. It requires you to choose one direction and ignore everything else. And for intelligent people, that feels like a mistake. We want to keep our options open. We want to pursue multiple paths simultaneously so we don't miss out on opportunities. But here's the brutal truth. Trying to build wealth without directional focus is like trying to win a race by running in every direction at once. You're expending energy, you're sweating, but you're not moving toward any destination. Financial direction means choosing one vehicle and mastering it. Not 3, not 5, 1. Maybe it's real estate, maybe it's building a business. Maybe it's developing a high-income skill and deploying that income strategically through investments. It doesn't matter which one you choose. What matters is that you choose and then you commit with everything you have. But most people can't do this. They want to invest in stocks and start a side business and learn about cryptocurrency and build passive income streams. and develop multiple skills, and they end up being mediocre at all of them. Because focus is a finite resource. Here's what wealthy people understand that broke smart people don't. Wealth is built through compounding, and compounding requires time plus consistency in one direction. If you keep switching strategies every 6 months, you never get to the part where things start to compound. Think about it like, if you plant a tree and then dig it up every few weeks to check if the roots are growing, you'll kill it. But if you plant it, water it consistently, protect it from threats, and give it time, it becomes something substantial. Your wealth is the same way. You need to choose where you're planting your energy and resources, and then you need to stop touching it. Stop second-guessing. Stop optimizing. Just let time and consistency do their work. This is where intelligence becomes a liability, because you're smart enough to see that other approaches might yield better. You're smart enough to notice when something isn't growing as fast as you, and you use that awareness as justification to pivot. But pivoting before compounding kicks in means you're always starting from zero. So here's the framework. Choose one income-generating vehicle. Commit to it for a minimum of 2 years. Not casually, not as a side project, as your primary focus. And during those 2 years, ignore everything else. Don't research alternatives, don't explore new opportunities. Just execute relentlessly on the one thing you chose. 2 years sounds like a long time, but you're going to be 2 years older anyway. The question is, do you want to arrive at that point with 2 years of compounded progress in one direction, or do you want to arrive with 2 years of scattered effort across 10 different directions? High-value life design isn't about doing more things. It's about doing fewer things with greater intensity. It's about understanding that depth beats breadth in almost every scenario that matters. Most intelligent people are building lives that are a mile wide and an inch deep. They know a little about everything. They're competent at many things, but they're not exceptional at anything. And in a world where exceptional people capture disproportionate rewards, being good at everything means you're winning at nothing. This is part 2 of the series. In part 3, we're going to dive into the psychological resistance that shows up when you actually start building something real. But for now, make sure you're subscribed because these concepts build on each, and I want to hear from you. What's the one vehicle you're choosing to focus on? What's the thing you're committing to for the next 2 years? Drop it in the comments. Making it public creates accountability, and you'll probably inspire someone else to get clear on their direction too. Here's something that's going to sound harsh, but you need to hear it. Most people don't have an identity problem. They have a courage problem. You know who you want to become. You can picture the version of yourself that's disciplined, focused, wealthy. You've imagined that person 1,000 times, but you're not willing to endure the discomfort required to become them. So instead, you stay in this weird liminal space where you're not satisfied with who you are, but you're also not committed to changing. And you fill that space with consumption, more podcasts, more books, more courses, more content that makes you feel like you're growing without actually requiring to grow. But growth isn't comfortable, transformation isn't convenient. Becoming someone new requires you to kill who you currently are, and that process feels like death because in a very real way it is. Every habit you release, every comfort you sacrifice, every familiar pattern you abandon, it's a small death. And your nervous system fights it, because your brain's primary job is to keep you safe, and safe means familiar, even if familiar is making you miserable. This is why purpose matters, because without a compelling reason to endure the discomfort of change, you'll default back to who you've always been because it's easier. Purpose isn't some abstract philosophical concept. It's the answer to the question, why am I willing to suffer today for a future that doesn't exist yet? And if you don't have a clear answer to that question, you'll quit. Every time. Because when things get hard, and they will get hard, you'll ask yourself why you're doing this. And if the answer is vague or weak, you'll give yourself permission to stop. But when your purpose is clear, when you know exactly what you're building and why it matters, discomfort becomes fuel. Every obstacle becomes evidence that you're on the right path because easy don't require transformation. Let me ask you something. What would you endure for the life you actually want? What would you sacrifice? What would you give up? What comforts would you release? Because if your answer is nothing, then you don't really want to change. You just want the fantasy of change without the reality of it. Emotional clarity is about getting brutally honest with yourself. It's about admitting that maybe you've been lying about what you want. Maybe you say you want financial freedom, but what you really want is to feel secure without having to take risks. Maybe you say you want to build something meaningful, but what you really want is validation without vulnerability. These aren't judgments, they're just observations. But until you're honest about what you actually want versus what you tell people want, you'll keep creating results that don't align with your stated goals. Self-mastery is the ability to do what you said you would do, when you said you would do it, regardless of how you feel in that moment. And it's the single most important skill you can develop. Not intelligence, not charisma, not connection, self-mastery. Because everything else you want to build requires sustained effort over time, and sustained effort requires the ability to override your momentary preferences in favor of your long-term commitments. Most people can't do this. They're completely enslaved to their emotional states. If they don't feel motivated, they don't work. If they're anxious, they distract themselves. If they're bored, they switch to something more stimulating. But your feelings are just biochemical signals, they're not commands. You don't have to obey them. When you feel resistance to doing something important, that's just your nervous system trying to keep you in your comfort zone. It's not evidence that you shouldn't do the thing. It's evidence that the thing matters. So here's the practice. Every day, do at least one thing that your emotional state is telling you not to do. Not because you're trying to punish yourself, but because you're training your nervous system to understand that you're in. You feel lazy, but you work anyway. You feel anxious, but you take action anyway. You feel uncertain, but you commit anyway. That's self-mastery, and it's built through repetition, not revelation. Personal energy is your most valuable asset. More valuable than time, more valuable than money, because energy determines the quality of everything you do. You can have 12 hours in a day, but if you're depleted, distracted, and running on autopilot, those 12 hours produce nothing of value. So you need to protect your energy ruthlessly. That means eliminating people, habits, and commitments that drain you without producing anything meaningful. It means saying no to 99% of opportunities so you can say yes with full presence to the 1% that actually compounds. Most people leak energy everywhere. They say yes to things they don't care about because they don't want to. People. They maintain relationships that exhaust them because they feel obligated. They consume content that agitates them because it's become a habit. And then they wonder why they don't have energy for the things that actually. High-value living requires ruthless prioritization. It requires you to become comfortable with the fact that most things, even good things, are not for you. Not because you're incapable, but because your energy is finite and you've chosen to deploy it toward specific. When you protect your energy this way, everything changes. You show up to your work with presence. You make decisions with clarity. You create with intensity. And the results reflect that focus. So let me bring this full circle. Intelligence without direction isn't just ineffective, it's dangerous. Because it gives you the illusion of progress while keeping you trapped in the patterns. You feel productive because you're learning. You feel strategic because you're analyzing. You feel prepared because you're planning. But none of that translates into results unless you choose a direction and commit it with relentless focus. Everything we covered today, the paralysis that comes with seeing too many options, the discipline required to override your thoughts and feelings, the necessity of choosing one path and letting it compound, the courage to become someone new. It all connects. Because transformation isn't intellectual, it's behavioral. And behavior change requires you to stop thinking your way through life and start acting your way into a new reality. You already know what to do. You've known for a while. The question isn't about information anymore. It's about identity. It's about whether you're willing to become the person who actually does the, need to be done. And that requires you to give up the version of yourself that explores that needs to understand everything perfectly before starting, that values safety over growth. It requires you to step into uncertainty with conviction, to choose a path even though you can see the flaws in it, to commit fully even though you don't have guarantees. This is part 2 of 3. Part 3 is going to address the deeper psychological blocks that show up when you actually start executing. The fear, the resistance, the self-sabotage. Make sure you're subscribed because missing that final piece will leave you the same loop. But right now I need something from you. If this video shook something loose, if you recognized yourself in these patterns and you're ready to stop hiding intelligence and start building something real, I want you to write it in the comments. What's the one direction you're choosing? What's the vehicle you're committing to for the next 2 years? What identity are you stepping into starting today? Make it specific. Make it public. Because declaring it creates accountability, and accountability is what turns intention into action. And if someone you know is stuck in the same pattern, smart, capable, but somehow always preparing and never executing, send them this video. It might be exactly what they need to hear. Part 3 is coming soon. Until then, stop analyzing. Stop optimizing. Stop waiting for perfect. Choose, commit, execute. I'll see you in the next one.